I'm going to show you two separate methods of taking notes from your sources and organizing them in a way that will make it easy for you to manipulate them to come up with your outline, and also will save you from having to go back into the source to find the citation information. Method number one is the most straightforward, but it's also a method that requires further work afterwards. So here you can see on my screen that I start with the citation for the source. I'm using MLA 8, of course, here. And I put that up as a sort of heading. And underneath it, what I'm doing is just copying and pasting sections of the document that I think are useful and that I might want to use in my paper. You can also paraphrase if it's a long paragraph and you don't want to have to read it again. How you take notes is up to you. In this case, I just did a little cutting and pasting, and I thought I might want to see the information in context. And if I decide to use it, I will paraphrase it later. What is really important is this. You need to make sure that each piece of data, notice I've done it for each one, has what I call this little tag. It's actually your in-text citation that you will use later. And this allows you then to manipulate the little pieces as you make up your outline. You'll actually be able to cut and paste and move them around without forgetting, okay, which source did I get that from? This is so, so important. Otherwise, you'll be confused. You'll have to go back to your sources and try to find it. And I've tagged it with the page number as well because I don't want to have to search that document again. If you're wondering about the S, this particular source was a supplement to a regular issue. So the publisher used S to stand for supplement, but this is a real page number. So I just, using my skimming methods, went through the document and decided that these were the portions of that document that I might want to use in my paper. And I do the same for each source. I find visually when I have a long research document, because remember, I do very long papers, it's easier for me to visually separate my sources by putting a little line of asterisks. You can use whatever method you want, but it is visually, there's a lot on the page, so this helps me to discern one from another. You might also want to use a different color code or something like that. So you can see that I've done the same thing for each one, and now my citations are already done. Even if I switch to a paraphrase, it's already done, it's already there. So I did that for each of my sources. Later, I'll be able to manipulate and move these around. This is the easiest method, but it also will require you to do some reorganizing. Method number two is more efficient, but it takes a little bit more brain power. In this case, I started with a works cited. You don't necessarily need to do that if you're using RefWorks. That information is already stored in RefWorks. I just did it here as a demonstration. In this case, what I'm doing is as I read each article, I'm coming up with little phrases that categorize the type of information that I'm finding. This will help me when I decide on my outline what issues I'm going to address in my paper. So I started with the first source. This is Murray and Fuller. And I decided that, okay, this section has to do with loss of nesting habitat. So rather than having to read this whole paragraph, I can see just at a glance that I have some information on loss of nesting sites. And we're going to come back to this later. Also from Murray and Fuller, I saw that they addressed the fact that there was, because of pollution, a loss of food sources. That's a separate issue, so I just created a little heading, and notice I'm using color to make it easier on myself. And then as I continued to read in the document, I saw that they were addressing the issue of migratory birds. Those are birds that don't necessarily live in that region, but are passing through. So I put some information under that heading as well. And you can see that, again, I've used my in-text citation, and now the information is already kind of organized. So having used these headings, I then proceeded through my next source, which was Reynolds et al. And I found some more information on loss of nesting habitat. So I just, instead of having something on Reynolds, I popped that information under this category. Now I already can see, do I have enough information to make this a section of my paper? And I actually think I do. So I found two separate portions of this paper, and you can see two different pages on page 11 and on page 13. I found some data that would be useful if I want to address loss of nesting habitat. Now I have some pretty decent information. And you can also see that when I got down to my third source, Rosencrantz, I found additional information from that source on this topic. So now, just at a glance, I can see I have some really good information, and actually quite a lot of it, on loss of nesting habitat. So I certainly want to make that part of my paper. When I get down to loss of food sources, I only have information from one of my sources. That might be enough, but maybe not. And now maybe I know that I need to go back in my research and refine my searches and say, I'm going to look for some more information on loss of food sources, seabirds, water pollution. Maybe I can find some other sources. Here under migratory birds, I do have information from two different sources, and I think that might be enough to make a paragraph in my paper. So I hope you can see that this method requires a little more thinking, but it's going to save you effort down the line when you're making your outline. I hope these two are helpful to you, and I will see you back in class on Tuesday.